Welcome to Building Community. I'm your host, Donna Rodriguez. Today, as part of our ongoing discussion about the 7 dimensions of health and wellness, we're going to focus on intellectual health and wellness. Intellectual health is not measured simply by IQ or academic learning, but also involves mental stimulation, cultural activities, general knowledge, and creativity. For today's conversation, I'm joined by 2 guests whose interests and histories are perfect examples of stimulating intellectual health. Connie DeLego is a Plymouth resident. She's a mom with 3 grown children. Among her other accomplishments, she's the director at Priscilla Beach Theater, has over 20 years of experience in theater, lived for 12 years on a Navajo reservation, is a filmmaker, has spent time as an educator, a social worker, and today is the director of Elder Affairs for the town of Plymouth. Dr. Ken Texera is a professor of psychology at Quincy College and holds a doctorate from Fordham University. His research in health psychology spans decades, and Dr. Tex is focused on helping vulnerable populations thrive while living with cancer and addiction. Among his achievements, he's been named the research director of Drug Story Theater, which is an innovative prevention strategy to keep adolescents from becoming addicted to drugs. Thank you both so much for being here today. This is going to be a fabulous conversation.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
And we've had so much fun talking, just getting ready for the show. I guess I'd like to start with, for each of you, how will you define intellectual health and wellness?
Do you want to start?
I would like you to start.
Okay. Sure you would. You can't steal my words.
Well, what are the things that you believe are involved in intellectual health?
You mentioned it earlier with the creativity, of course, curiosity, wanting to strive for more, being excited and eager about learning new things, following your bliss, taking challenges, taking that road that everybody else doesn't take. That's some of it. But mostly being interested, being concerned and part of something.
Having common sense, having different experiences, being able to learn from other people, all of that adds, don't you think, to our intellectual interests and health?
Absolutely.
Now, intellectual health really spans the entire lifespan. Let's start by talking a little bit about children. And Connie, you even said that you were interested in talking about before birth. What are the things that we can be doing to really help to increase the intellectual health for our children?
Okay. Can I just go back for a minute? Because I didn't hear your definition of intellect, and I wasn't going to let you get away with that.
Well, one thing, and I love how you guys came out of the gate and you talked about it's not just processing power. It's not just about doing math problems. One thing, if they were to test your IQ or your intellectuality, what they would look at is how quickly you can process stuff and how complex of stuff can you process and how well you can rotate objects. But I like how you're calling it intellectual health because it's a whole person, right? And we're connected to everything. So I love how you talked about creativity. That's a big part of it. Practical, common sense. Some people are like, I'm wicked smart, but I'm smart like the streets, And so if you put me in the streets, I'd probably last 15 minutes, right? So there's certain things that are common sense, like how to buy a car and other things. So it's all of that, right? And when we talk about the lifespan, there's a lot of things we can do to kind of get the best trajectory out of ourselves as we possibly can.
What we're saying, I think, is it's definitely not just intellect. It's not the intelligence. It's not just being smart or being educated or anything like that. It's what's up here that works and that makes you work.
And defining as a whole person.
Right.
And the ability to problem solve, the ability to work through things, the ability to follow steps. All of that are part of the things that I think intellectually help us to be able to get through our lives in a very positive manner and also to be able to be a part of our families and communities and help others.
Which is what we were talking about earlier when we talk about children, because this has to start somewhere. I mean, that could be, you're the scientist. I mean, it could be argued whether this was something that was innate or developed. I'm thinking in terms of, like we spoke about the Einstein
like a baby Einstein
things where, or maybe that was after the birth. I know for a time they're talking about playing music before the baby's born, so that talking to the child in the womb and everything, that they do hear us, that they are aware. Yeah. They're very much aware of the mother's temperament or emotions, if she's, or drugs, or whatever is going on. That baby, that fetus is aware of all those things. Is that where it starts? Because then when they come out, when they're born, if you can foster that, keep them motivated, keep them on the track, read to them a lot. Play music to them. Don't just play what's on the radio. Introduce them to the classics or introduce them to jazz. But stimulate, motivate, develop their creativity so that as they get older, continue in that vein, I think.
And following their cue. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people think we have to do this to kids to make them smarter.
Right.
But we actually have to follow their cues. And something that you can do with young kids is see when they're interested and see when they look away. And when they look away, they've had enough. It's time to stop. Because now if you keep going, they're just going to get frustrated. So now you have to follow their cue. And another thing too is you were talking about with these extra learning things, please don't waste money trying to buy stuff to make your kids smarter, because some of those things they found out actually lower IQ. You know, you put them in front of the DVD or disc set, whatever companies out there, they try to say your baby can read, your baby can do physics. You know, your baby
Inside
can
of 4 weeks if you purchase this set. Yes,
Right.
exactly.
And some kids will be so far beyond and they'll put them on TV and yes, they can do all those things. But you know what? This is what we got to do. We got to put our face in front of a baby. We got to talk to babies. We have to, you know, follow their cues of babies and then we can see them develop.
Let them be babies.
Yeah, and
Let
follow
them
their
be
interests.
2-year-olds. Let them be
Yes.
4-year-olds. You know, you hear stories of, well, my kid is going to be 5. I want to make sure he gets into such and such a school and everything. So they start pushing this and pushing that on them. You can
Or
really
go
mess
pro,
up a good
right?
kid.
Like going pro.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
can stimulate learning, and you agree that it's important for as parents or educators or community members to be aware of where a child is developmentally, and
Absolutely.
try to help to give them stimulating, interesting, different activities that will match where they are in their
Yes,
development.
and help them grow from where they are, so that you don't want to ever give them something that's way above, because then that's frustration, and that leads into the I'm not going to do it, I can't do it,
Yeah.
I can't, and you know.
And you touch on the point of niche picking. One thing that the advantage of well-to-do parents have versus parents that don't have as much money is a rich kid gets to niche pick across more stuff, meaning they can find their spot because they've gone to, you know, all the different activities you can go to. So they tried bowling, they tried art, they tried theater, they tried to do all these different things, and then you discover what they're good at. A poor kid may not have as many options to see where they're going to fit in. And that's where, you know, these programs in school or after school activities and all these other things become really important. So then you can follow the kid's interest.
And there's
Right.
a lot in so many of our communities that's available for families, for children. In Plymouth alone, there's Plymouth Family Network that's through the education department that offers an opportunity for parents to learn also in how to support their children, to learn to grow readers. Our local libraries, there's so much out there for us to get involved in, no matter what our economic level.
Right.
I think it's important just to think about, number one, where are our children developmentally and what can we offer them? You brought up a couple of points in between the two of you that I've just personally am fascinated with. I think the devices. I personally see where there is space for all of these wonderful electronic devices we have access to, and being able to expose children to things like computers. But they're not babysitters. They're not something our
Right.
children should be sitting in front of all the time to learn. The setting correct boundaries, but also giving children an opportunity to learn independently.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm on that one too. It's like I think it certainly breeds isolation. You know, the violence thing. If we ever wanted to get onto that topic of it, a lot of these games they're war games, but they're innocent. No, war is never innocent. Killing people is not innocent. It isn't fun. You know, we can't make it look. We can't neutralize it and say, "Oh, it's just a game I'm playing." No, what is that doing to the intellect? You know, you go back even farther, Donna, and when we talk about after the baby's born and after this growing and everything. And yes, we want to motivate them and help them with their creativity and such, but we also need to expose them. Well, yeah, get them into the family thing. Have them understand what it's like to have a family. Everybody's not lucky to have that, I understand. But as best we can, mom and dad and what they mean to me and how I'm part of this family. I don't just come and sit and eat and play and go to bed. I'm part of this family. I have a responsibility to this family. I kind of think that's getting lost, you know, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm not seeing and hearing as much of the kids taking on responsibility, whether it's washing dishes, taking the stuff out to the trash, simple things, chores. What happened to chores?
Yep.
Well, my kid is too busy with after school, he's got to go to soccer and he's got this. That's true, but chores, that we part of the family, be responsible. This is going to help be a more compassionate citizen.
And building that practical knowledge, too.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right.
Simply know how to wash dishes.
Yeah, that's a
you know
practical
what I mean?
skill.
Yeah,
I learned how to
know how
do
to
that.
fold clothes,
and
do
the
the laundry.
feeling of a job well done, and then self-esteem will come from that.
Absolutely.
So I think balance is absolutely the key. And some of those learning tools are great. just in small doses,
Yeah.
because these kids are wired to learn, and they're going to pick that up anyway. I mean, watch any kid can grab an iPhone and use it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We don't have to train them to do that. But
A 2-year-old
face-to-face
can
contact,
find,
Yes,
can find an app
absolutely.
that they want.
absolutely.
But-
And going 15 layers into that thing to find it. I have a 5 and a 2-year-old, and boy, they both can just be like, I want to watch this show, and then they're all the way in.
And
So-
I personally find, I think the children can get overstimulated by a lot of the electronics and
yeah.
a lot of the television shows that are on now. So I think it's important to, as we've all been saying, and I think this is very common sense, balance, but also giving children an opportunity. You're right, if they're interacting with a device, they're not interacting with a person.
Right.
Yeah.
Interacting with people is also part of our general knowledge and learning in how to interact in
Absolutely.
a social situation. So all of that plays into our intellectual development, our emotional development, our spiritual development. We can't really look at any of the dimensions of health and wellness
You can't.
completely individually.
there's context, and it's all interrelated. Even at how people communicate, we use devices to communicate. If you look at how younger people, like the students I teach that are in their 20s, they like to use text messaging as their main method. Maybe for you folks, it might be telephone, it might be an email. But if you think about what's your favorite way to communicate and see which generation is using what and how that affects every other type of communication.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people are having trouble with face-to-face contact.
How do you have grandkids that can't talk to their grandparents? Seriously. I mean, I've said it at work. I've often said, you know, what time is it? Oh, it's 2:15. What?
What does that even mean?
What's quarter after
What's-
2? That's, you know what I mean?
I look at the thing and it says numbers.
You know, I actually I have a picture that I took in Pennsylvania or Chicago or someplace, and it's a long line of payphones. You know, it's just a really cool long shot.
And when was the last time you saw that?
Well, I got this recently, but I was showing it to somebody, and they said, "Oh, wow, what are those?"
You use a
What
thing
are
called a quarter
those?
and you put it in the machine.
Right. And
Those
so-
are the numbers.
And things have been moving so quickly.
Yeah.
You know,
Faster and
as
faster and
years,
faster.
as years go
Absolutely.
by, things move much faster, and technology is moving much more quickly. This is a wonderful conversation, and you two are such incredibly enjoyable guests. But I'm going to ask, we're going to take a brief break, and we'll be right back to talk about intellectual health and wellness on Building Community.
Health Imperatives is a nonprofit that offers free, low-cost, and confidential services in southeastern Massachusetts. In Plymouth, we provide reproductive health care such as birth control and pregnancy tests, sexual assault counseling, and WIC nutrition and education counseling. WIC, which offers free healthy food for young families, also just opened a second office in the Harbor Community Health Center in North Plymouth. For more information, please contact us.
Welcome back to Building Community. In this episode, we're talking about intellectual health and wellness through the life cycle. I am joined by Dr. Ken Texera and Connie DeLego.
Welcome back.
Good to be back.
We had a very fun conversation in the first half, and there was just so many directions we can go in. But I'd like to talk about a couple of really clear issues in this half of the show. When we left off, we were saying how you really can't look at any one of these dimensions completely individually, because they all do play in together to have a healthy person and healthy community. When we talk about intellectual development, and we left off talking about children, they're even finding in studies that physical development and physical health and activity help to improve our ability to learn and develop. The Plymouth system is actually working with Beth Israel Hospital to develop a new program here called Box. And I know you were at a seminar recently.
I was.
Could
I
you
was
describe
very
that?
happy to go to that and very happy to hear about this because, pardon me, we know that there's so many problems with education right now. But basically, the fundamental concept of this is exercise. It's fun and exercise, and they start the day off with the kids, and they played it for us, a sort of a tape of they're modern songs, you know, hip-hop songs, and they'll say, all right, just stretch your arms and stretch your legs, jump side to side, do a dance, walk around the table. It just, like 5 minutes of really vigorous exercise, in which everybody was laughing because there was a bunch of adults making ourselves look like really fools. But we're doing all this. I mean, Vinny and Tom and Gary Maestas, everybody was there, including Peter Holden, and they're all doing these funny things. And when it was all over and we all sat back down and we're still laughing and think about it now, what a change that did to us in those few minutes. All right, yes, we're adults and blah, blah, blah. But you have kids that are going into school that maybe didn't have a really good breakfast, maybe didn't have a really good home life, maybe whatever the situation is, maybe had a wonderful time, but they still come into school and very often they're tired, they're cranky, whatever else. You give them this for 5 minutes or however long they're going to do it. I don't know exactly how the program goes, so forgive me if I'm misquoting. But they do this for 5 or 10 minutes and then they're invigorated. Is a good word for it. They're invigorated, but it goes way beyond that because what they're proving, and it's Harvard University, Tufts, Harvard and Tufts that are doing this. What they're finding is that serotonins, all of the things that happen when your blood is circulating properly. Don't you love how scientific I am?
I love it.
Allow you and prepare you.
They prepare you. They turn the synapse around and they start sparking, and you learn better. You're more eagerly. You're engaged with the other people. And we're talking about intellectual health. Then that's part of the whole thing is the engagement. You know, if I'm talking to you, I want to be talking to you. I don't want to be talking at you. I don't want you to talk at me. We need to engage, you know. So this it helps with their studies. It helps with their sleep patterns. They had testimonies from different kids and mothers and fathers that have done this with it. And I think it will be a very, very wonderful.
And it is a pilot program they're
It is a
doing this
pilot
year, so I'm
program.
really looking forward to seeing what comes out of it and what the study shows.
Yeah.
But we can't stop thinking about intellectual development and health just at the school age.
No.
We have to look at it through our entire life cycle.
Right.
And it's not just going to college, it's not just taking classes. Sure, that's part of it. But what are some of the other things that we should be doing as adults throughout our lives to really help to, as you say,
Use it or lose it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, one thing I want to define too is for intellectual health and well-being, you have your working memory, and this is how quickly you can come up with an answer. So if this was a game show and we said, what's the answer to this? How quickly do you press the button? Right? So it's like, bing, 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 I got the answer. Watch Jeopardy. The young people are always really fast.
We try it out for
right?
Family Feud.
So then, in the last section, what they do is they ask a question where you have a lot of time to think. The older people always do better in that because that activates wisdom. So if you were to draw a line, this is your working memory. It peaks at about 30, but your wisdom never stops. And that goes and goes and goes. And you can never fill your brain completely up.
is that your long-term memory?
Not long-term memory.
Okay.
Working memory
different-
and basically crystallized intelligence, but it's really wisdom. So wisdom grows throughout your whole lifespan. So older people might be a little bit slower at getting the right answer, but the answer will always be better because they have wisdom. Does that make sense?
It does.
And you can learn throughout your whole lifespan. In the 50s, they thought, don't fill your brain with useless facts, you'll fill it up. Right? And they're afraid of filling their brain up with useless facts. But
What do
we
we
know
use,
we
1%
can't
or-
do that. We can't fill our brain. So you can fill it through the whole entire lifespan. And the only way to keep that brain fresh and working is to use it. So the best advice I can give to anybody at any age, but especially for our older young people out there, all the older adults need to keep continuing to use it or they'll use it. So problem solving, engaging activities, games,
reading.
face-to-face stuff.
Poetry, write poetry, write anything,
Art.
write poetry, paint pictures. We did a paint night 2 nights ago. As a fundraiser for the Alzheimer's. We're doing an Alzheimer's walk. We get a team this year for the first time ever. But anyway, so we had 12 or 15 people in there, and I had to leave because I had a rehearsal for something else. But just walking through and seeing what they were doing, this is incredible. None of them had ever painted before, but it was taking the time to sit down and somebody's instructing you and you're listening and you're doing it and creating these wonderful pictures. Write a poem. We have so many seniors, believe it or not, that write poetry that come out of the woodwork. I didn't even know that. Read a book, discuss, go to book club, get into a book club.
And never be afraid to try something new.
Absolutely.
I think we can get so caught up, unfortunately, our reality in our society is our day-to-day. We are raising our families, we are working, we are caring for our homes, so we have our routines and we walk through the day and we just keep going. But giving ourselves an opportunity to try something new, to learn something
because that's
new,
all
to
rote.
meet new people. All of these things we're going to experience through theater, through art classes, through poetry. So on a regular basis, offering ourselves new ways to expand our mind.
And the other thing to tie this back to the exercise you actually, if you exercise a lot, you create new brain cells,
Yeah.
and those new brain cells are more resistant to Alzheimer's and age-related dementia and decline. So if you're exercising, you're actually exercising your brain, and it's the very best thing you can do to keep your intellectual health is exercise. More than crosswords, more than even using it. So using your physical ability actually improves your mental ability, which ties into the stuff we can do with kids. What's amazing about kids, by the time they hit about 17, they're going to have 70% of their muscle mass is built by that time. And that's from Dr. Wayne Westcott. So most of the strength and muscle you're ever going to develop in your life happens when you're a young kid. Now, video games are awesome, and they're really entertaining, but we have to get kids outside and playing sports and active like this in school. And the thing that's so scary about me in schools is the first things to go are the music and the art and recess.
I know.
Because the kids need to run around. These bodies have been designed
Yep.
to learn while moving. There's a great thing, do schools kill creativity? It's the most watched TED thing ever done. And he makes a really interesting argument. And the example is, if you're a dancer, you have to learn by moving. And schools are not conducive to learning on the run.
But luckily, many are now trying to get back to that
because
and
of the
find
Box
creative
program.
ways like the Box program to add on to what's happening in the schools, whether it's through volunteers and families and parents getting involved. So as you say, I think you made the perfect point that this is a lifespan thing. We have to exercise our body to keep our brain healthy. We have to exercise our brain through reading, through games, through problem solving, through experiencing new things. This is what's going to help to keep our intellect healthy throughout our lives. Now, Connie, I know, and Ken, you actually work a lot with seniors as well. There are a lot of concerns for seniors. I think sometimes people either forget to talk about this or forget how important it is to keep their bodies and brains stimulated to stay healthy. I read a report playing a game like a trivia game or Scrabble once a week can help to decrease somebody developing Alzheimer's.
And stress and depression and alcoholism and so on and so on. It's, you just said about maintaining this intellectual health and keeping it going and everything. I think, and I may be wrong again, but we were talking about this a little earlier. My parents, well, that was a long, long time ago, but maybe your parents or your parents growing up, no, maybe not your parents. Let me say, after the 60s, people were more educated.
Had more
and
opportunity.
that is not putting anybody down. They had a better opportunity to education, it seems, in greater numbers. Earlier than that, my mother wasn't allowed to go to college. Women didn't go to college. You got married. If you went to college, you went to college to find a husband to get married. So your life was basically based around your family, your home, your laundry, you're hanging out the clothes, all of this, and then getting the kids ready, and then whatever. That was your whole life, and taking care of your husband and making your home look pretty. Later on, as we moved up, my generation became educated. And then with kids, we were able to work outside of the home. Women were a little bit more liberated, if that's the word we want to use. And I'm not saying
more
whether
engaged
it was,
and more active in their
that's
communities.
what I'm trying to get at, exactly. So you had that, and you maintained that, you kept that going. Now, that first generation that I was talking about, that older generation, which is now the elders, don't really know what to do. They weren't motivated. They weren't stimulated. They weren't necessarily taught to, and not everybody, but taught to read and to be engaged and to keep going. We have some incredibly fabulous seniors that come into the Center for Healthy Living. Healthy aging, whatever. I say it wrong every time. But anyway.
What used to be known as the Council on Aging is now the Center for Healthy Living,
Correct.
which is an important change in the way you look at things, to be able to talk about healthy living through your entire life.
Right.
And to backpedal and put that into context biologically, all of the college-educated people that are getting older now are more resistant to age-related decline because you create more neural density. Every time you learn anything, it changes the plasticity of your brain, and it creates more neural networks, which creates more density. The more density means it's more resilient against age-related decline. This is why Connie's so amazing, right? She's so amazing because...
That's why I forget everything.
But think about this too. Think about all the baby boomers coming up that are so educated. You see them changing the way we look at aging, right? We all expected them, because I started studying this in like the 90s when they're like, oh, this silver tsunami is coming and all these people are going to get older. Yes, they got older, but they're changing the way aging is
We
done.
look at aging.
Yeah, and that's creating quite a phenomena. It's a tsunami, I love to say, because we have a lot of people, we have people in their 90s, late 80s that didn't plan on living that long. They didn't have that expectancy, you know.
Which must
so
be a surprise.
pretty much,
And it's changed dramatically,
They didn't
yes.
really have enough. They didn't get the memo about big savings accounts and all that stuff. So it is an issue, and it's a real issue, and it isn't anybody's fault. Part of what I shouldn't get into all this, but
I think to start to tie our conversation up, because we only have about a minute left.
Oh, dear.
Do you have? I know this has gone so quickly. Do you have any final thoughts? Just a word or two you'd like to offer?
stay active. And if you can't get up to the Nook, if you can't get out and do that, then at least luminosity, something on checkers, chess, cards, write letters. People don't even write letters anymore. That's stimulating in itself. There's nothing to keep you from keeping your brain going, and you won't live long if you don't do that.
Work your brain and work your body.
Because it does work into everything, and that works into this healthy person is a reflection of what my community should be. Right?
I'd love more elders to come to Quincy College because
Oh,
I've
yeah.
had some 70-year-old, 70-plus people in our classes,
Oh, my
and
God,
it made
yeah.
those classes so much better because, you know,
Richer.
It's,
Oh, yeah.
it's the wisdom. It's the wisdom of ages and decades that can be infused for young people, and the people love them, and they love the young people. And you know what? Come hang out with some of us young folk. And for the young folk, go find some elders to hang out with because this intergenerational
love it.
conversation needs to continue. And we'll keep doing this work as long as you guys keep listening. So.
Yeah.
And thank you both for sharing your
thank
wisdom
you.
and your enjoyment. I've really enjoyed talking with both of you today. And I hope you've enjoyed our conversation today as well on building community. For replay times, resources, and more information, visit pactv.org. And if you have show ideas, comments, or questions, email buildingcommunity@pactv.org. Thank you again for watching.